Can you draw these shapes? Then you can draw cool stuff. In this video I will show you the 8 basic shapes you can use to draw awesome comic books. Start off with a stick figure, and if you're having trouble getting the proportions right, have a look at this video first. But let's start with a simple standing pose. The main 3 shapes are a sphere, a box and a cylinder. Simplified 2D versions are a circle, square and rectangle. And a front view of a standing pose you can dress with just these 2D versions. But when the camera moves a little, you'll need to make the shapes 3-dimensional, and these don't look like muscles yet, but it's a great starting point and good practice to get some depth in your drawings. For example, is this cylinder pointing back or front? That has to be clear in your mind. And these are good doodle practices. Note the difference between a box where the front and back edges are the same size or where the back one is shorter. It instantly creates a more dramatic perspective. Then see if you can change these boxes into arrows, which is a good skill to have when you're drawing buildings. Okay, let's add some more shapes and start drawing actual muscles. Let's add the American football, the soft heart, and a tapered cylinder or a cone, which in this case I drew bent a bit, the tube, and finally the bean or water balloon. Nudge nudge, wink wink. So the head is there already, but slice it in half and add that heart shape underneath. It's a bit easier to understand from a side angle. The chest is one of those tapered cylinders, but squished and turned upside down. Shoulders are footballs. The neck actually are kind of those tubes. Some small heart shapes for the traps. Note the neck muscles reach deeper than the torso, and that point can be used to drop some soft squares for the pecs, but also again leave some space at the bottom. That's actually the solar plexus, piece of bone you can feel very easy on your own body. And the abs start from there. A couple of hearts, rib cage as well. That old Jim Lee style always drew the rib cage like this with the six-pack under it, but I don't think that's very realistic, so I always draw the abs going up to the pecs. A heart shape for the pelvis, the rolled up sock, kind of a bean. Rest of the pecs are squares, and 2 beans for the obliques, footballs for the biceps, and then we have those tapered cylinders for the underarms. Football triceps, add some more shoulders as well. These are circles, some small beans for the ribs, add a football on top of the underarms. Then for the quads, make sure that the first elongated football goes from the outside till the center. Then the adductors go from the midpoint until the middle of that shape. Knees are actually kind of double, and then the main quad you divide into 3 like this. Drop the straight tibia shapes. The calves seen from the back are footballs, but from the front, make sure to keep the outside longer than the inside. And it also kind of has a dent here. So outside curve, inside curve. Triangle for the foot with a couple of squares. Make sure the ankles on the inside and outside are not at the same level. Okay, let's try it on this dynamic pose. All the same shapes. And I like that kind of Bruce Lee pose, but I want to do it again from scratch. And when you're just looking for a shape, I tend to merge the torso parts together into one big bean shape. That's quicker for doodling. Transform it a bit. Okay, happy? Now drop it again to make the shapes clear. I keep flipping it so my eyes get a fresh view on it. That makes it easier to fix problems. Okay, now for this next pass, I'm going to outline every single muscle, and let's make this a boxer. So I'll give him some shorts and those long soft boots. You could say, well, this looks like the finished drawing, but most people don't look like Joe Donnelly. So I go over it again with some more detail, and then I leave parts out so I don't connect all those muscle lines. Now the idea is to kind of think about where the shadows would fall. So on this shoulder, the shadow falls in the deep part, and the pec sticks out from the chest, so the bottom will definitely have a shadow, dropping a full line for the pecs. You could say, well, a six-pack is cool, but I don't think that looks realistic, so I tend to not outline the abs completely. Alright, and what I'm doing different with the inks is make sure to push hard and soft on my pen so the lines go from thick to thin, especially on lines like these. When they go to the bottom, I tend to make them thin. I'll talk about coloring in another video, but flat color, two-tone, some highlights, and done. So what if you're drawing a back and you don't know where to put the muscles? There's three types of reference. One of those muscle diagrams, an actual photo, or an example from a comic book. And each of these ways have pros and cons. The muscle chart is very clear, but it ignores the skin we have. So it's like everything is a super tight outline, which does not look realistic. Then photos are very useful because they have skin. It's very clear where to drop the shadows later, but the shadows are not always consistent with what your story needs. Sometimes you're looking forever for a correct pose. Then a comic book is very useful because you see how good artists interpret those shapes, but it's kind of like a game of telephone where you don't know what they used as reference, so maybe they used another artist who used another artist, which can be very far from the actual truth of something. But let's see how they compare to the reality. If I'd make a shape map, I would definitely use the traps, that middle muscle, the shoulder blade, and that filet pur. And of course the lats. So whenever I'm drawing without reference, I just kind of remember these shapes. Yeah, actually this Arthur Adams and John Romita Sr. sample looks pretty consistent with that. But my main advice for finding the shapes is photo reference. Let's check this Muhammad Ali. It's got all the shapes we mentioned earlier. Now one thing here, so if I would have drawn this by myself, I would have dropped some clavicle bones and then maybe a shadow, but in his case it's kind of a thick muscle, so there's no dent where his collarbones are, which is interesting. I think this is Floyd Patterson, also an interesting pose to analyze because you see how the lats look from the side. Yeah, useful for if you're drawing a windsurfing Wolverine or Superman tearing open a crashing plane. But you know, we all want to draw like our heroes. I still say looking at other art is super useful. Check out McFarlane and Arthur Adams, noticing that they both draw 3 abductor muscles in almost exactly the same way. Let's see if that's accurate. Pretty accurate. Anyway, just to show you that everything is built up of those basic geometric shapes, and it's super fun to play around with them. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and catch you next time.